Welcome, traveller of twilight thoughts. Tonight, let us return to Alagaësia, a land of ancient forests, starlit skies, and the soft wing beats of dragons long vanished. This is the story of the dragon riders, their rise from fire and sorrow, their golden age of balance and peace, their slow unravelling, and the darkness that came before Galbatorix's fall from grace. Told in 5 gentle parts, this tale will drift like mist through memory, from the forging of the first bond between elf and dragon, to the quiet tremors of descent, to the storm that shattered the skies, and at last to the tender spark of something new. Let your breath slow, let your thoughts grow soft, and let the story carry you through silver towers, mountain halls and sun-warmed fields, past forgotten songs and broken oaths, into the deep, mythic dreamscape of a world that still waits. This is not a tale of endings, but of echoes, of hope, and of the riders who once were light and may yet be again. Now, let us begin. Part 1. Rise and Fall of the Order. In the beginning, there was fire and fury. The dragons came before the riders, before the cities of man, before the songs of dwarves or the silent groves of elves. They soared across Alagaësia, vast and untamed, their wings casting shadows over mountain and moor, their voices shaping the world with fire and thunder. But with power came pride, and pride gave way to war. A time came when dragons and elves, so different yet alike in their strengths, turned upon one another. None now recall the first slight, a flame that scorched a sacred glade, or a spell that felled a beloved beast. It matters little. What followed was ruin. The War of the Scars raged for years uncounted. Dragonfire scorched the forests of Duveldenvarden. Elven arrows turned the skies red with blood. Whole valleys were lost, and still neither side yielded. For dragons would not bow, and the elves would not break. And then, from the ashes of that fury, came peace. A truce was forged not in silence but in song. A binding pact of magic and trust, brokered by an elven sage named Eragon. He stood alone before a council of dragons, unarmed and unafraid. With words woven in the ancient language, he asked not for forgiveness, but for a future. The dragons listened, and in that stillness, a single dragon, vast and golden, stepped forward. With one curved talon, he touched Eragon's heart, and thus the first bond was formed. The dragon riders were born. Take a deep breath. Let the sound of wings calm you. You are safe here. In those first years, the order was small. A handful of elves and dragons, learning each other, growing together. The bond was sacred, a melding of soul and scale, of thought and feeling. Rider and dragon shared everything, joy and pain, memory and dream. They trained in secret glades and high eyries, far from cities and war. They learned the dance of flight, the song of the sword, and the deep truths of magic. For to be a rider was not merely to wield power, it was to be changed by it. Each pairing glowed with potential. A hatchling dragon, bound by magic to a young elf, would grow swiftly, their life force entwined. The rider, too, was altered. Time slowed for them. Wounds healed quicker. Their strength bloomed with their dragons, and with time their numbers grew. The order became more than a brotherhood. It became a way of life. They built their first hold on the edge of the spine, carved into the mountains where clouds clung like breath. Silthrim, it was called, the sky mirror. Here, riders trained beneath starlit domes and sparred beside stone perches. The walls sang with ancient spells. The air was always warm, smelling of leather, old wood, and dragon smoke. The riders did not seek power, not then. They sought harmony. They flew over Alagaësia not as lords, but as stewards. They helped rebuild the elven forests, whispering growth into burned groves. They tamed storms in the sea lands and brought spring back to frost-bitten valleys. Where once war had burned, now riders brought peace. Their very presence inspired awe. Children would point to the skies as dragons passed overhead, their scales glittering like stars. Villages left out offerings, bowls of berries, carvings of wood, not in worship, but in thanks. And always the dragons remembered. Their songs spoke of the past, but their hearts held hope for the future. For in this partnership, both races had found something unexpected: understanding. Let yourself settle deeper now. With each breath, imagine yourself flying above the forests of Alagaësia, quiet, free. As the order flourished, it grew beyond the elves. In time, humans came into Alagaësia, curious, clever, and quick to adapt. At first, they were viewed with caution, but some among them showed promise, humility, courage, a longing not for control, but for connection. And so, a second pact was formed. Dragons began to bond with human riders, just as they had with elves. These new pairings brought change. The humans' shorter lives and sharper urgency added a fire to the order that had not existed before. They asked bold questions, took risks, dreamed wider. Among the dwarves, the riders were met with wary respect. The mountain clans did not seek bonds with dragons, nor did dragons seek them. But friendships blossomed nonetheless. The riders honored dwarven traditions, helped settle disputes, and even aided in the shaping of stone thrones and runes. And later, even among the Urgles, fierce and proud, seeds of trust were planted. Though no Urgle ever became a rider, there were those who aided the order, and in return were granted safe passage and healing. There were feasts shared on snowy cliffs, blood oaths sworn in firelight. The order then was not one people, but many. They became bridges between the races, guardians of balance, carriers of law. Their halls welcomed scholars and soldiers alike. Their scrolls bore languages now forgotten. Their dragons flew across borders with no need for coin or crown. In this golden age, peace endured. But golden ages never last. Subtle at first were the signs of decline. The riders, once scattered across Alagaësia, began to withdraw. They built more grand halls, tall spires of stone and crystal, and filled them with echoes, with laws, with ceremony. Some dragons began to question the bonds. Not all enjoyed sharing their minds with mortal hearts. A few grew distant, preferring the wild peaks to the chatter of courts. Among the riders, ambition whispered. Power always seeks more power, even in the gentlest of hands. A few riders began to see themselves not as stewards, but as rulers. They spoke of guiding the lesser peoples, of reshaping the world for the better, always for the better. The bond between dragon and rider, though sacred, could not protect against pride. And among the younger riders, especially those born into the order's later generations, there was sometimes a disconnect. They knew only peace, only privilege. Their dragons were bred in hidden groves, their training rigid, formal, distant from the world they were meant to serve. Fewer riders walked the villages. Fewer still listened to the songs of the old races. There were whispers, too, of strange tensions. disagreements in council, petty rivalries cloaked in noble language, a duel here, a dispute there, all small things, but the Order, once humble, no longer saw them as warnings, for when one stands upon a mountain for too long, it becomes easy to forget how far one can fall. Still, to the outside world, the riders remained a symbol of peace. They settled border skirmishes with a word, calmed storms with a gesture. Their dragons, ageless and wise, still sang the songs of unity. Children still looked up in wonder. Elders still lit candles in thanks when dragon shadow passed overhead. But beneath the beauty, cracks had begun to form. And though no one knew it yet, a storm was coming. The riders had risen from ashes once before, born in the fire of war, shaped by trust, and bound by the most sacred of pacts. They had kept Alagaësia in harmony for centuries. Their dragons, proud and wild, had learned to love alongside their riders. And the people, from dwarves to men, had known peace unlike any other age. But peace is not a fortress. It is a garden, and even the best tended garden must be watched with care. Part 2. The Shadow Gathers. The sun did not set all at once on the dragon riders. No, it dimmed slowly, like the last embers in a hearth, fading into twilight long before true darkness came. There was a time, long after the Order's founding, when peace felt endless. The riders, bound to dragons, still flew the skies in service of all peoples. But change, as it often does, crept in not with thunder, but with footsteps soft as dust. Long had elves and dragons walked together, first in war and then in wonder. Their pact was sacred, sealed with ancient magic and elder wisdom. But Alagaësia was vast, and beyond the forests of the elves and the mountains of the dwarves, another race stirred, mortal, restless, ever-spreading, the humans. They came not with fanfare but with flame and will, and in time dragons met them, some with caution, some with curiosity, and some with kinship. The dragons saw in humankind a fire that mirrored their own, brief but fierce, wild but true. And so the pact was extended. A second shaping of the ancient spell was cast. For the first time, humans were chosen to join the Order. Their names are mostly lost to time, written in crumbling scrolls or whispered by trees that remember too much. But they came, strong, eager, awestruck, and they bonded. Green dragons, gold, deep sapphire blue, wings stretching wide across plains and hills that had never before seen their kind. Humans, once earthbound, now soared. But the old riders, the elven kind, watched with quiet eyes. They welcomed these new brothers and sisters, but deep within they wondered. Would such brief lives grasp the weight of eternity? Could passion be tempered into peace? Elven riders moved like flowing streams, slow and sure. They spoke rarely, listened often, and let magic pass through them like wind through reeds. But humans grasped, they hungered. They asked why when none had asked before. They cast spells quickly. They sought knowledge that had once waited to be earned. They debated the ethics of binding spirits, of shaping minds, of war. And some among the elder riders began to feel the shift. Not a cracking, not yet, but a tilt. The Order that once moved as one heart now pulsed with many. In Illyria, where riders gathered from across the land, voices began to rise. Some dwarves, who had long advised but never bonded with dragons, now whispered among themselves, "Will the order turn solely to men? Will the old ways be forgotten?" Elves debated in silence, as was their way, but a rift grew between tradition and change, and among the humans, those still new to the skies, pride took root. Why should we not lead? Have we not earned our place? In training halls once filled with harmony, subtle rivalries flickered. Not hatred, not yet, but competition. Riders once bound by purpose now eyed one another with quiet judgment. And the dragons. Some grew uneasy, for dragons feel truth not in words, but in the currents of being. Beyond the cities and strongholds, the land itself began to shift. In forgotten villages, magic twisted crops into strange shapes. In deep caverns, old spirits stirred and sighed. Wild dragons, long absent from the skies, began to fly lower, closer to roads and fields. Some of them sang of restlessness. Some said nothing at all. In one glade, a bonded dragon broke the pact, flying into the mountains and never returning. Her rider sat in stillness for days, his eyes clouded. No one knew why. In another place, a human rider cast a spell that pierced the will of another creature. Not in defense, but in experiment. He was rebuked, but not exiled. The council frowned, then moved on. One by one, these moments passed, like fallen leaves brushed aside. But roots grow deep in silence. Humans aged quickly. Where an elf rider might serve for centuries, a human had mere decades. So the order began to train them faster. Shorter lessons, less meditation, more practicality. Some dragons grumbled, "They are not ready." But others replied, "They will never have time to be." A divide grew, not just between riders, but between dragons themselves. Ancient ones withdrew into the clouds, while younger ones embraced their human bondmates with fierce loyalty. What had once been a seamless braid began to fray, thread by thread. Trade routes that once welcomed riders now closed to them. Border towns, once protected, built walls higher. The dwarves, though allies, began to train warriors of their own, not trusting wholly in the order. Even among the elves, a faction arose. Let the humans tend their own lands. Let us return to Duveldenvarden. The world did not erupt into fire, not yet, but it grew colder, and through the cold came a whisper. Why serve all when we are stronger than all? Not shouted, not spoken, just thought, in quiet moments, by a few, and that was enough. Despite the tensions, the riders still flew. They still healed the sick, settled disputes, studied the old magic. They were revered, loved even, but love can blind, and power, even when noble, casts a long shadow. At the height of their strength, the dragon riders believed they were unshakable. They believed the sky would always carry them, but the sky does not choose. It only watches, and far beyond the reach of spells or treaties, something began to stir, something angry, something wounded, something waiting. Take a final breath, long and slow. Imagine the riders gathered at twilight, their dragons behind them like mountains of living color. The peace still holds, for now, but even the brightest stars eventually set. Part 3. Embers in the Veins. The rise of Galbatorix and the breaking of the riders. Let your body soften now. Let your breath settle like leaves drifting to earth. We return to Alagaësia, not with fanfare, but with stillness. For the world is changing, and the whispers of fate have begun to grow louder. There came a time when the forest did not feel as familiar, when dragons flew lower, more cautiously, when even the stars seemed to blink more slowly above the plains of Alagaësia, though the order still stood, proud, radiant, cloaked in wisdom, the roots beneath them had begun to splinter. The fractures we glimpsed in earlier years had deepened. The old riders, born of elf and dragon, who meditated beneath moonlight and walked barefoot across the sacred stones, now stood beside newer riders, younger, bolder, often human, whose hearts beat with fire instead of stillness. Some of these new riders sought only to learn, to serve, to uphold the ancient balance, but others saw the rider's mantle as a ladder, not a vow, and it was from among these embers of pride and ambition that one name would rise. Galbatorix. He had not always been a shadow. Once he was brilliant, a prodigy among the human riders, skilled in sword and spell, revered for his strength, admired for his grace. His dragon, Janunvusk, was mighty and golden, a beacon in the sky. Together they ventured far, farther than most dared, into the wild edges of the Beor Mountains, over the untamed sands of Duvrangargata, where even the wind had forgotten its name. But it was in one of these distant journeys that the tragedy occurred. Ambushed, outnumbered, Janunvusk fell, torn from the air, and Galbatorix, broken, wandered for months through mountain and madness. When he returned, he was changed. He demanded a new dragon from the elders. They refused. This was not their way. The bond, once sundered, was sacred. To break it, to remake it, was unthinkable. But Galbatorix, once so noble, could not, or would not, accept their denial. He saw not wisdom in their refusal, but betrayal. And so the fire spread. What followed was quiet at first. Rumours, disappearances, a corrupted spell, an elf found drained of magic, her wards unravelled. Some whispered that Galbatorix had disappeared into the spine, seeking forbidden knowledge, ancient words older than the pact itself. Others said he had not gone alone. There were murmurs of another, a silver-tongued sorcerer who had followed him into the dark, one who would one day become known as Morzan, first of the Forsworn. But the council hesitated. They debated. They waited. Even the wisest among them, Oromis, Vrael, and Islanzides' kin, were slow to act, for the idea of a traitor among the riders was unthinkable. And so, Alagaësia turned. The kingdoms felt the shift. Surda grew restless, watching the borders of the Brodring Empire with wary eyes. The dwarves of Trondheim retreated deeper into their stone halls, whispering of unrest above. Even the Urgles stirred, not with war, but with a quiet unease, sensing what the land itself had begun to feel. Something unnatural was gathering. A wound that would not bleed, but fester. It was not one moment, but many, that signalled the breaking. A village burned, a rider slain in secret, a hatchling stolen from Illyria. One by one, Galbatorix gathered followers, riders disillusioned, hungry for power, or bound by darker magics. He taught them spells long forbidden. He bent spirits to his will, not in harmony, but in domination. He called himself savior, but acted as conqueror. And when the order realized what had begun, it was already too late to contain. Still, the riders tried to stand against him. A council of elders met beneath the Vault of Souls, where the oldest memories of their kind still whispered in the stone. They spoke of exile, of confrontation, of war. But Galbatorix struck first. His magic, once golden and warm, now came cloaked in frost and flame. He unravelled ancient wards as though they were thread. He turned dragons against their riders, and he slew Vrael, High Commander of the Order, in single combat, not in glory, but in fury. From that day forth, he named himself king, not of the riders, but of Alagaësia. The order fell not in a single battle, but in a series of silences. One rider vanished, then another. Hatcheries were destroyed, dragon eggs were shattered. The great towers of the riders, Doru Areba, Ilirea, Silthrim, dimmed, then crumbled, and those who survived went into hiding. A few fled to Soothe. Some wandered as hermits in the desert. One or two, like Oramis and Gleda, disappeared into secret vales, but the age of riders had ended, not in a blaze of glory, but in a long, slow dusk. Yet even in this fall, a seed remained. Not all had turned. Some remembered the old ways. Some lit candles where flames had gone out. And one day, far from the ruins of Ilirea, beneath a mountain, a single egg would wait, blue as sky, silent, patient, waiting for the one whose heart burned not with ambition, but with wonder. But that part of the tale is still to come. In the next part of our journey, we will walk among the scattered threads of rebellion. We will sit with the Varden as they whisper in caverns. We will trace the map of certain generals and feel the beat of wings in exile. For though the riders have fallen, hope has not. Sleep now, gentle listener, and let the stars watch over you. Part 4. Ash and Echo. The resistance of Soothe and the secret rise of the Varden. In the long silence after the fall of the riders, a hush fell upon Alagaësia, a hush filled with mourning, confusion, and fear. The towers where dragons once soared stood cold and crumbling. The language of power, once spoken with reverence, now became a weapon wielded by the few. And Galbatorix, dark-cloaked and crowned in shadow, called himself king. But this is not only the tale of his dominion. This is the tale of those who remained, of the soft ash that glowed red beneath the ruin, embers that did not die, but waited. Let us walk now through the time of quiet resistance. Let us wander the hidden halls of Soothe and listen to the heartbeat of the Varden. When Galbatorix rose and the last great rider strongholds fell, the world changed not with thunder, but with silence. The elves retreated into Du Velden Varden, their sorrow deep and speech spare. The dwarves closed their gates, mourning their dragon friends in ways no outsider would ever see. And the land itself seemed to grieve. Forests grew denser, wilder. Roads vanished under ivy and thyme. Villages fell into superstition. Even the sun, it was said, dimmed. But beneath the stillness, resistance stirred. Not in grand halls or mighty fortresses, but in whispers, in stories, in stubborn hearts. Let us pause here. Breathe in, gently. Let the grief of the past settle like soft dust. Now breathe out, and make room for the embers that remain. To the south, nestled between rock and desert wind, lay Soothe, a small kingdom forgotten by the empire. It had no great army, no rider bastion, no claim to power. But what it had was memory and patience. Soothe remembered the old ways. Its elders still spoke the names of dragons with reverence. Its shepherds told tales of a time when men and beasts soared as one. They saw through Galbatorix's glory. They called his peace a silence of fear. So while other lands bent knee, Soothe quietly stepped aside, refusing to bow, refusing to shout, waiting. Its king, Orin, was no warlord. He was a scholar, a brewer of potions and philosophies, but behind his gentle eyes burned a fierce clarity. Soothe would not forget. From Soothe's shelter, the Varden emerged, not as an army, but as an idea. The word itself means wardens, not warriors, not conquerors, but those who watch and protect. It began with a handful of fugitives, old riders, squires, law-keepers, magicians hunted for knowing too much. They gathered beneath the desert cliffs under the guidance of a woman named Anora. Anora was not noble-born. She had no sword of legend, but her voice, calm, steady, wise, gathered others to her side. She taught them that rebellion did not have to burn loudly. It could move like roots through soil. It could grow in silence. The Vardens' early years were marked by secrecy. They lived in caverns beneath the Haderach desert, their paths marked by songs instead of maps. Elves would send silent aid, potions, scrolls, blades. Dwarves would carve safe halls into the bones of the earth. Messages were carried in riddles. Allies met by moonlight, and their most powerful weapon was not might, but memory. They remembered the names of fallen dragons. They memorized the true history. They guarded the last fragments of rider lore with the care of monks tending embers in the snow. And so, while Galbatorix ruled from gilded thrones, the Varden ruled from hope. Let us pause once more. Close your eyes. Imagine a fire deep underground, small but unyielding. Now breathe in and breathe out. Let that warmth settle in your chest. The Empire did not sleep. Galbatorix, ever watchful, sent agents to root out rebellion. Shades with eyes like coals walked the borderlands. Spies whispered in taverns. Dreamers vanished. Yet the Varden endured. They learned the enemy's tricks. They fought not with open blade, but with stealth and cunning. A bridge would collapse just before an army marched. A fortress would find its grain stores ruined by mold, as if by fate. To the common folk, these were signs, proof that Galbatorix was not invincible, that something ancient still stirred in the deep places of the world. It was during this time that the Varden began to reach outward, carefully. To the dwarves, they sent envoys bearing old songs and shared grief. The dwarves, ever wary, offered sanctuary in the halls of Fathendur. To the elves, they sent a child who dreamed in the ancient language. She returned days later, marked with blessing and wordless approval. Even among the humans, cracks formed. Minor lords tired of empire taxes. Scholars whispered questions. Blacksmiths forged blades, just in case. The Varden became not just a group, but a thread, woven through every race, every border, every heart that had not forgotten the sky. In this time, the stories of the riders changed. They were no longer just tales of glory. They became prayers. A woman in Serda would paint dragons in ash across her child's door. A farmer would leave a stone in the shape of a scale atop his roof, in case they return. And in taverns lit by low fire, old men would speak. I saw one once, a rider. She was tall and bright-eyed, and her dragon the colour of river moss. They saved my village from a fever long ago. The Varden listened and remembered. Though small, the resistance grew, not with flags, not with drums, but with quiet faith. A healer joined who once served the riders. A boy arrived who could speak to animals. A mapmaker came bearing charts older than the empire itself. Each new member brought a spark, and from those sparks the fire deepened. Let us rest here. In the years before the storm broke again, the Varden did not yet strike. They trained, they listened, they prepared. They waited for a sign, a true sign, that the age of the riders was not lost forever. They whispered of prophecy, of a new rider perhaps, of an egg hidden, of a dragon that might still choose. And somewhere in the deep forest, a young man named Brom kept a watchful eye. But that tale, dear dreamer, is for another night. So sleep now, wrapped in the hush of rebellion. Not all fire roars. Some glows quietly beneath the earth, waiting for wind. The Varden are not forgotten. They live in the stories kept alive across generations, in lullabies, in secret symbols, in silent defiance. The dragon wings will rise again. But for now, rest. Let the embers glow behind your closed eyes. Let the memory of riders past lull you, and may you dream of caves lit with hope. Until next time. Good night, dear listener, and may the stars guard your dreams. Part 5. The Echoes Reawaken. And so, we come at last to the hush that follows the storm. The dragon riders were no more. The halls of Illyria lay cold and bare. The skies, once patterned with wings and flame, turned empty, and for a time it seemed the dream had died. But dreams, as the ancients know, do not truly die. They sleep. And when the world is ready, when hearts have been tested, and the stars have whispered once more, they rise again. Let us begin then, not with fanfare or prophecy, but with quiet. It began in the spine, a jagged range of mountains feared by most and shunned by many. There, hidden among twisted pines and cold stone, a dragon's egg stirred in silence. For years it had waited. Stolen by the Varden from under Galbatorix's very nose, this egg had been spirited through mountain passes, kept hidden from seers and sorcerers alike. It passed from hand to hand, city to cave, until at last it found its resting place in the wild, nestled beneath the boughs, waiting not for a king or soldier, but for a farm boy named Eragon. He was not chosen by lineage, not by blood, but by spirit. When the egg hatched and the blue-scaled dragoness blinked up at him, a tremor passed through the land. Something long dormant had shifted. The riders, or something like them, would rise again. Eragon was not alone. Far from him, hidden in the towns and wilds of Alagaësia, other remnants of the old world still lived. There was Brom, once a rider, long thought dead, who now wandered in disguise with a heart full of sorrow and stories. It was he who found the boy, he who trained him, he who passed on the ways of the order, the sword, the spells, the language of old. But Brom too was hunted. Galbatorix had sent his twisted servants, the Razak, the Shades, even the dreaded Morzan, to erase all memory of the riders, every whisper, every hope. He could not abide a future in which dragons might live again beyond his command. Thus, Eragon and Brom journeyed in secret, through shattered towns and forgotten glades, each step a stitch in the tapestry of something greater. While Eragon trained in the wild, a different fire burned in the south. The Varden, once scattered, now gathered strength in Surda and the Beor Mountains. Their leaders, Ajihad, Naswada, and the mysterious twins, plotted in tunnels and torch-lit halls. Their soldiers bore no banners, but their resolve was steel. They were the broken, the bold, the ones who still dared to believe. They trained not just to fight, but to remember. Every lesson of the riders, every betrayal, every vow. And when Eragon found his way to them, wounded but alive, dragon at his side, a new chapter began. He was not the return of the riders. He was the beginning of the return. Saphira, bold, wise, radiant. She was not like the old dragons, and yet she carried their fire. In her, the memory of the ancient pact lived on. She spoke not only in words, but in presence. With every wing beat, she healed the air. With every growl, She reminded the land that dragons still ruled the skies. Together, Eragon and Saphira became more than symbols. They became change. They faced Urgles, not as enemies, but as misunderstood warriors. They fought shades, not as monsters, but as broken echoes, and they stirred the hearts of elves, dwarves, and men alike. Their bond was a bridge, their courage a spark. In Elismera, deep within the elven woods, Eragon met Oromis, a hidden rider of old, kept alive through elven magic and secrecy. Oromis taught him what Brom could not: the philosophy, the grace, the inner stillness of the ancient riders. There Eragon learned that strength was not in sword or spell alone, but in stillness, in understanding, in restraint. He saw the failures of the past not as shameful, but as warnings. The pride of the old order, the ambition that cracked its foundations, the disconnection from those they swore to serve. And he swore to be different, not just a warrior, but a guardian. The battles that followed were fierce. The battle of Farthendur, the siege at the burning plains, the quiet struggles of diplomacy, healing, and choice. Each left a mark. Each carved Eragon further into what he was becoming. And though Galbatorix still ruled, though his hand tightened around the land, something had shifted. Hope was no longer a whisper. It was a roar, not only in Eragon, but in Arya, fierce and radiant, in Naswada, wise beyond her years, in Roran, whose hammer was justice, in every soul who rose, not because they could, but because they must. And so, dear listener, we close this journey where it began, with a dream, the dream of peace and flight and balance, of dragon and rider side by side, of a world not ruled but guided, of a legacy not forgotten. Eragon's tale continues beyond this telling. So does Saphira's. So do the Varden, the dwarves, the elves, and the quiet, waiting hearts of dragons yet to hatch. The order may have fallen, but its light flickers still, in caves, in clouds, in the breath of one who dares to believe. Take a moment now and breathe. Inhale gently. Exhale slowly. Let your shoulders fall. Let your jaw soften. Imagine a candle's glow flickering behind closed eyes. You are safe in the folds of story. Let this moment be a soft one. Close your eyes, if they are not already closed. Feel the hush between heartbeats. Breathe slowly, in and out. The story pauses, but your rest deepens. Breathe once more, dear dreamer. Inhale as though drawing in silver mist. Exhale as though letting go of sorrow. Let your chest rise like a calm sea, and fall again like waves kissing the shore. Now rest, O dreamer. Let the fires dim. Let the stars wheel above. Alagaësia will wait for you, in dreams, in stories, in stillness. Breathe softly, sleep deeply, and may the dragons guard your slumber.